Welcome back. This week, in week 4, we are exploring the pledge. I will actively ensure that no child is put at risk by the way we share their story online. When we collect stories and images of children, there are a significant number of risks to consider. Some are more obvious than others. The primary consideration are the risks posed to a child during the process of content gathering. Often, we are asking a child to talk about the most traumatic or difficult moments in their life. Thinking back to week 1, children's rights. Children have the right to protection, and this includes the protection of reliving traumatic events. Often, stories are being shared with a journalist, a filmmaker, or someone from our communications team. Whatever their role, they are often a stranger to the child who is being asked to share their story. Imagine for a moment what that must feel like for the child. So what can we do to reduce the risks of this experience? Firstly, have the team supporting that child discussed whether they are ready? And has the child themselves been included in this discussion? Has a risk assessment been completed considering the risks to that child sharing their story? Has anyone considered the support that child might need after that experience? Is there a safe adult present to ensure that if they are upset, they can be supported by someone they know and trust? And critically, is that adult empowered enough so that they can stop the process altogether if the experience is too much? And finally, has anyone actually asked the child if this is the story that they want to tell about their lives? We must also consider the risk posed to a child and their families when they are identified in their communities as to having faced a certain challenge, such as homelessness, child marriage, or living with a disability. Whilst our social media presence and content may be targeted at the donors and supporters in the UK, anyone can access that content, including community members. Identification in the community can lead to stigma, exclusion, or even harassment. And this stigma will be faced by whole families. We must also consider the risk that the assumption is made that families are getting paid to have their photos taken or receiving other benefits, and what impact that has on their relationships in the community. In some contexts, the risk to identifying children may be higher than others, and so it is important to have a strong knowledge of the community when making decisions around stories. As an organisation, it is important to reflect on who is the best person to make decisions about whether something is appropriate to share or not. And often, this won't be someone in your comms team. What happens when we lose control of an image? What if someone downloads that image and uses it for their own purpose? Do we really know who is visiting our pages, reading our stories, and viewing our images? And for what purpose? It is not uncommon to hear stories of other organisations using other people's images to portray their work, where that child's face and story is misconstrued or misrepresented, or at worst, a whole new narrative is created around that image. Do we really share effectively with the children sharing their stories with us that we could lose control of an image? Is that part of your informed consent procedure? Have you considered the damage that could do to a child, as well as your relationship with that child? During the process of planning Overexposed, we have heard countless stories about relationships between a child and an organisation being damaged when their image was used by an organisation or misused by another organisation. Have you considered the risk posed to that child or young person if the relationship between them and their safe adults break down? There is also the wider risk of misrepresenting a context. Are we really presenting communities properly and fully when we only present one part of the narrative of their lives? Or are we doing a disservice to their lived experience? Do these stereotypes put at risk how our supporters and other people see and understand the work? Do we adequately share the nuances of our work and of the community's daily lives? If we are to shift as a sector into more responsible, more accountable story and image creation and sharing, a key element of this must be to understand the difference between intent and impact. Good or even best intentions do not buffer against the harm we can cause with the one-dimensional use of images and stories. Finally, we must consider the safety of a child's data and how we store their information securely. Photos, consent forms, case studies should be saved in a password-protected file or in a lockable folder in the locked office to reduce the risk of data being lost or accessed by the wrong people.